So the very first thing that I like to do is take out all the drum units, all the toners, so we can get at the transfer belt and transfer belt blade and the fuser on the side behind the duplex unit. So let's do that first. Now before taking out any of the inner workings like the transfer belt, we have to take out the transfer belt blade. And to do that, that's going to be right behind here. There's one screw holding this plate on, and it's right in this little hole. So I'll take that out first. Set that screw in there, and then this plate comes off. Once that plate is taken off, you're left with the actual transfer belt blade, and that can be tricky sometimes to take off, but it should slide just straight out, trying to keep this lever kind of more of an upright position. If you start turning it, it could be difficult to get out. So once that's out, this is what it looks like. You do not want to tip it over. There's an auger in here, and all your waste toner from the transfer belt is being held in here. Now what I like to do is I like to empty this over a trash can. Just be aware that it can get very dusty and dirty, so just be careful when you're handling this. Now we're going to come around to the duplex side of the machine and take the whole duplex door off. So first we're going to open it up. And then right down here, where the hinges are, there's a screw that holds the whole piece on and securely so it doesn't move around. We need to remove that first prior to taking out the door. So this is the screw I'm talking about. I'm just going to take that off. All the way off. Helps to have a magnetic screwdriver for this. Next we have to take off one of these bottom cover plates, and it's held on by two screws, one right here and one right here next to the fax card. So let's take those off. Okay, and to get this plate off, a lot of times you have to kind of open up the duplex unit just to get it to come away. Now we'll set that aside. And then what we're going to do is look at this side piece here. And again, it helps to open up the side of the duplex unit. And first we need to disconnect the blue cable wires. Then there's a screw holding two ground wires on. I'm going to take that off. Set that aside. And then, as you can see, this blue wire is kind of connected to the frame with these little plastic clips. Now those can be hard to take off. Sometimes it helps to have a flathead screwdriver where you can just pop it off, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to take my flathead screwdriver and just kind of pop that out. And now that the blue wire is free, we can go ahead and take the whole duplex door off. To do that, just tilt it up slightly, slide to your right, and the whole thing comes off. Just be careful none of your cables get wound up. And we're going to set that aside. Now that we got most of the pieces off, it goes pretty quick from here on out. The next thing we're going to do, though, is take the fuser unit out. And to do that, we're just going to open this lower panel. And the fuser is held on by two silver flat screws that take a Phillips head screwdriver. One on the left, one on the right below the green turn wheel. So we're just going to loosen these. These don't actually come out. They are permanently secured to the fuser unit, so you never lose them. So once those are loose, we can just slide the fuser unit right out, and we'll set that aside. Then what we want to do since we're trying to get to the transfer belt so we can clean the inner cavity of the machine and clean the sensors while we're there, first we need to take this silver plate. There's a green little tab on the right hand side. We're just going to flip that down, and then there's a blue cable that holds the transfer belt, or that connects the transfer belt to the machine, and there's a little tiny connection on the left hand side. I'm going to show you that right now. So as you can see, what I was trying to point out was this little blue cable right here, and a lot of times the wires get tucked up inside the frame there, and that's okay. That's probably a good thing because that keeps it out of the way of all the moving parts. But what you want to do is kind of peel those out and then very carefully disconnect that wire. Okay? Once you do that, you should now be able to pull the transfer belt completely out, and you can use these two black handles on either side of the transfer belt, and it comes straight out. Now on the left hand side of the transfer belt there's a little handle that kind of pivots up, and then on the right hand side there is a blue metal plate that you can use to actually grab a hold of it once you have it halfway out to pull it the rest of the way. Just be very careful, you don't want to set this down on anything that could scratch it. But I like to take a quick visual just to make sure that there are no tears or scratches or any major damage. And again, set that aside. We're going to come back to that. But again, be very careful with it. Don't let any sharp edges touch that transfer belt because it could be disastrous for you. And now we have the inner workings in the empty cavity of the machine. Now we're coming back to the transfer belt. Again, like I said, you want to just do a quick visual inspection on it. Just make sure there's no scratches, no major dents or damage to it. Right now I have it sitting upside down, and that kind of prevents the transfer belt from touching the ground or touching anything that it's sitting on. So again, quick inspection. I don't see anything wrong with this. I'm just going to take the air compressor once again and just blow out some of the mechanical parts on the side just to get any dust or debris away from the unit. Okay, now I want to show you how to clean the sensors. These sensors throw up, or I should say, are responsible for throwing up a variety of different types of error codes. It's going to be below where the transfer belt was and below the fuser. And you can see there's this probably about a 12-inch slide plate that slides to the left, and it's going to open up 3 different sensors, one on the right, one in the middle, and one on the left. Now I like to use a little Q-tip with a little moisture on it just to clean those out. Now before I do that though, during my air compressor blowout stage, I usually like to open that up, blow out those little cavities as well to make sure there's no dust. So what I'm going to do, take my Q-tip with just a little bit of moisture or Windex on it, and then I am going to just kind of stick it down in those little sensors, just kind of clean them out as best I can. The right, the middle, and the left. And you can kind of look on the end of it and you can see a little bit of dirt. And that's good. That means we're getting it all out. Do it one more time on each one of them. All right. Okay, now we can start the process of putting everything back together, starting with the transfer belt. So the first thing you want to do is, again, make sure that your metal guide on this, behind the duplexer is down. Secondly, always want to make sure that the drum lock is in the upper position, otherwise you won't be able to get this in. And then you'll notice on the transfer belt, it has these little metal feet and they just slide in the sides here. So we'll put that in. Pushing it all the way in. And then again you have this little blue cable connect that you want to reconnect. And then if you remember, The wires were kind of tucked into the frame when we took it out. We want to make sure that that gets done again to keep it away from all the moving parts. So it's connected. I'm going to tuck the cables or the wires in. There we go. We're going to flip up our metal guide. And now we can install the fuser again. Prior to installing the fuser, I also want to take a quick check of that. Lift it up. And you want to make sure that all these little fingers are intact and touching the rubber roller. And make sure that there's no excess debris in there that's preventing those fingers from operating correctly. Okay? So another thing you can do is, again, take your air compressor and just blow this off, get all the dust and debris out of it. Lastly, we can also take a quick look at the orange fuser belt. And it's kind of hard to see, but if you very slowly turn it, you can see if there's any cracks or scratches on it, anything that would damage an image from coming out properly. And as you can see, I actually see something right here, a little bit of debris. I'm just going to blow that out. Hopefully that won't cause us any problems later on. Okay, so everything else looks good. We're going to put this back in. And you can see right here at the front on both sides, it has these little tabs that are going to slide onto these little rails. Put that on, slide it in, and then we're going to tighten it down with the screwdriver with these same bolts that we took them out with. Okay, now we're going to work on probably the most difficult part. We have to reinstall the transfer belt blade. And at the very end of it, you can see you have this little hole. And if you look way back in the back of the frame there, you can see a little tiny button at the back that has to go into this receiving hole. Not only that, on the front side of the blade, it has this little button here that has to go in a little plastic piece here. Okay, and when you first go to put the transfer belt blade into the housing, you might, or I recommend that it kind of go with the blue lever pointed in the upward direction and actually slightly to the left. That usually helps the best. And it's just going to go straight in. And you might notice right off the bat that when you go to put it in, something seems to be blocking it. Well, if you look at the top, you see this white little plastic piece here that's in the downward position that's kind of preventing it from going in. And if you actually just push that up, that's actually this little tab right here. You can push it down and you can push it up. So make sure that's in the upward position, and then that will allow, that will allow the blade to slide in very easily. When I get right about all the way in, there's this little black tab on the side of the blade that's going to hit the metal frame of the machine. So when I get to that point, I'm just going to tilt it slightly to the left and just get it right behind there. And now the blade will go almost all the way in. And now we're going to move positions. So now if you look all the way to the back, you can see that I'm trying to line up that hole at the end of the blade with that little button on the back of the machine. Now at the same time, remember, I have to get the front plastic pin in that C-clamp. And what I like to do is first get the back button in place, and then what you can do is just slightly slide it back outward and then get the front plastic pin into the C-clamp, and that sits it in there really nice. So now we have the transfer blade in place, and remember, we still have to put on this little plastic piece on the front of it, and it goes just like that, and it's held on I'm sorry, just like this, and it's held on just by one screw, whoops, in this front hole here, okay? But before we put that on, I want to kind of test the blade, all right? And if you look real close, you can see the blade, and then you can see the transfer belt, the black piece at the top. Now when I close the drum lever, you can see that it sits right on that blade. Opened up, closed, open up, closed, okay? So sometimes doing that a few times right after you get it set in there is a good idea also, because if it's just out of place or out of alignment, just a tiny hair fraction, this will kind of jostle it into place, I guess. So again, we got this in, and we're going to put the front plate on. Held on just like that, and put one screw right in there. Okay, now we're back to the duplex side of the machine, and we're going to put the duplexer back on. But as I mentioned before, you want to make sure that you also clean out this unit, take the air compressor, blow it out, and then you also have these feed rollers here. We're going to clean those with the cloth again and a little bit of WD-40. I think I still have a little moisture on here, so I'm just going to clean those. Alright, so now this has to go on. You have a spindle here and a spindle over here, and they have to go in these holes. Now they have to go in at the same time, and you have to kind of hold the whole duplexer kind of halfway down. Get everything lined up, and it goes right on. So then we're going to take the axle screw and put that in. And remember, that only goes on the left-hand side. That's going to prevent it from going left to right and falling off. And then on the right-hand side, remember, we have the two ground wires and then also this blue wire that we have to hook back up. So I'm just going to spin the machine around here. And we're going to take one screw and get these two ground wires screwed in. And sometimes this can be difficult too, but just take your time. Screw those in so they're nice and tight. And then also remember that plastic clip that was kind of difficult to get off. First we're going to plug in the blue cable, and then we're going to take that clip, and I suggest that you still use that clip even though it's kind of annoying when you have to take it off, just to keep those wires away from the hinge and the moving parts so they don't get pinched or anything like that. So once that's on, the duplexer is back connected. We do still have to put this plate on. And remember, that's held on by two screws. And it's usually easier to put it on when the duplexer is down. And it just kind of fits up in here, and you probably have to close the duplexer a little bit. So I got it in there. It's nice and tight, and it kind of flows with the whole contour of the machine. And we have two screws to put in. And there you go.